In this part of the video, we're going to go over how to fill out a response to a governmental notice of motion or order to show cause. In the previous videos, we went over what the letters from the Department of Child Support Services are likely to say. We went over how to review an notice of motion to see what the department is asking for. We went over a notice to appear and produce, which you may or may not receive from the Department of Child Support Services. Now we're going to go over how to fill out this form. So this is the response. This is how you tell the court that you agree or disagree with what the department is asking for. Sometimes, though, it's a request from the other party. And even though it has a slightly different name, this form looks very, very similar to what the form looks like in private family law cases. I'm going to move my camera to get a little bit closer. You're going to start by filling out your name and address and phone number, fax number if you have one, email address, and who you're an attorney for. If you're representing yourself, you'll put in pro per or in pro se. I usually say in pro per. This is going to be the CSE number. You're going to get this form in your packet from the Department of Child Support Services. If you lose it, you can still go online and get a copy of this form. But some of the stuff that's auto-populated on this form isn't going to be auto-populated. You'll have to fill it in. So it's got the court, the county that the case is heard in, the court address, the party names. It's got the hearing date, time, department, and room, and it's got the court case number. So this is auto-populated what you get from the department. If you go get a copy of this form from the internet elsewhere, I'll have a link to where you can get that in the description. Then you're going to have to fill all this information out. So this is where you go through and one by one you compare this form to what's being asked for. So in the department's motion, they didn't ask for parentage order. If they did, then you would fill this section out. And your options are I do, I don't, admit that I'm the parent of the child. And then you can also say I'm the parent of all the children except the following. But again, this wasn't asked for in the motion we just went over, so we're not going to check this box here. Next one is child support. Well, child support was asked for. So we're going to check this box because we're going to say that we either agree to the order requested or we request the following child support order. So we had some pretty old information for Dad. Let's say that we don't agree to the order requested, and let's say ideally Dad would run a new calculation. And in one of my videos, I go over how to do a child support calculation. But let's say Dad didn't do that, and he wants support based on his actual earnings. So I request the following child support order based on actual earnings. And let's say Dad actually wants support to be below guideline because he's having a tough time getting to see the kids because travel expenses are a lot. So we're going to write that he wants below guideline. So Dad's going to want to provide more information about this. I wish I could get my camera to stop zooming in and out. If anyone has a solution to that, let me know. But here this gives the court and the department and the other party a brief synopsis of what Dad's asking for. Next option is health insurance coverage. Well, the department didn't request that in the motion, so we're not going to fill that out here. But if it was requested in your motion, you would fill out this section. Fees and costs, not requested, so we're not going to fill it out, but you know the routine. Property restraint, not requested, not going to fill it out. But we did have another order requested, and that was a seek work order. So a lot of times people don't agree to the seek work orders, and they say something like, I don't agree because I'm already seeking work. Well, okay. And let's say that Dad says that in this situation. I don't consent to the order requested because I'm already seeking work. In the counties that I appear in, the court's still going to order the seek work order, even though Dad's already seeking work. Basically, the commissioner is essentially going to say, cool, well then you can make a log of your efforts and turn it in. the commissioners don't usually say cool. That's just my boiled down assessment of what's being said. On to the next page. Again, we need to make sure that we've got the party names and the case number. And here's where we're going to put our facts in support of what we're asking for. So in this case, we're going to say dad's unemployed. And let's say he's not eligible for unemployment because he's been fired. Whoop, I spelled that wrong. If I had whiteout, I'd just white it out. If I don't have whiteout, I'll put a line through it and I'll put my initials. So what we're explaining is I'm unemployed and not eligible for unemployment because there could be a number of reasons. It could be that the party was fired. It could be that they were working under the table. It could be anything. But let's say in this case, it's because dad was fired. And in the actual case I'm using this as an example for, I don't know what dad's work situation was. I'm making this up. So what I, as a DCSS attorney, am going to argue is that dad did something wrong to cause his employer to fire him. So support should be based on what dad was earning or could be earning, because he should not be allowed to reap the benefits of doing something so bad that he gets fired and isn't eligible for unemployment. And the court usually buys that argument, but sometimes they don't. So the court's probably going to want to know from dad what the circumstances were under which he was fired. Dad should show up at court and explain the situation to the court. Let's say that dad didn't actually do anything wrong. Let's say dad was a whistleblower and this was a retaliatory firing. Dad's probably not going to get unemployment because he was fired, and he's probably going to file a lawsuit against his employer because it's illegal to fire somebody for whistleblowing. And dad may not even know that that's an option right now because it might have just happened. He might not find out that he can sue his employer and will probably win until he shows up in court on this matter. I do see that happen from time to time. And that's going to be a whole nother issue. Anyway, you're going to write what applies to you here. And then we're going to say, in this situation, we said dad can hardly afford the gas to go see his kids. So we're going to write that here. We're going to say that the kids live in Susanville and dad lives in Elk Grove. So it's probably about a 4-hour drive between Susanville and Elk Grove, and it's not cheap depending on what you drive. So what dad should do in this situation is he should do a Google map showing the mileage between where the kids live in Susanville, or where he drops the kids off in Susanville and picks them up, and where he lives in Elk Grove. And then dad should explain what he drives. So in this situation, let's say dad drives, I'm writing this as though I'm dad, a 2011 Toyota Tacoma that gets about 18 miles per gallon. Sometimes it gets a little bit better. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's what I usually calculate my Tacoma getting. And then dad will say, about how much it costs for him to fill up in gas, about what gas costs per gallon. And hopefully dad will figure out how much it actually costs him to fill up his tank to go see the kids. So interestingly, what dad spends for gas can actually be put into the child support calculation. And if the other party weren't a non-needy relative, the other party would end up having to pay for half of the gas. But the other party is a non-needy relative in this situation, so they're not going to have to pay for half the gas. Basically, dad's support is likely to be reduced by half of his total gas bill. And then we're going to want to know, is this per month or per week, how much he spends on gas? And it's entirely possible that once dad's child support is reduced by half of the gas bill, now he'll be able to afford to go see the kids, but it's entirely possible that he's still not going to be able to afford to go see the kids. Okay, and then if you need more room, then you would check there, and then you would get another sheet of paper. You can use binder paper, you can use computer paper, you can use a Judicial Council form specifically intended for the purpose. I see a lot of people use binder paper. You're just going to grab that other sheet of paper and you're going to make sure that you write at the top that this is a continuation of the facts in support of the response to the governmental notice of motion, and then you'll just keep writing. Okay, but in this case, let's say that Dad is done. So Dad's going to date, and Dad's going to write his name, and then Dad's going to sign his name. And then this here is the proof of service. So in another video, I go over how to do a proof of service. This proof of service looks a little bit different than the proof of service that I go over in my other video, but the concepts are the same. Dad needs to have someone over the age of 18 and not a party to this case serve a copy of his response and his income and expense declaration on the Department of Child Support Services, on the other parent, and then fill out this proof of service. Go see my proof of service video about how to do this. We're going to move on. I also go over preparing documents for filing. Okay, so then the next document is the income and expense declaration. Dad's going to fill this out, or you are going to fill this out in your case. I'm not going to go over how to fill this out because I go over that in another video. And I actually do an income and expense declaration for somebody who's employed as just a normal hourly employee, and then I do one for somebody who's self-employed. In this situation, Dad's unemployed, so okay, I will go over this quickly. Go watch the income and expense declaration video, but because in our scenario, Dad's unemployed, I'm going to go over this quickly. Fill this section out. Dad's going to put the name of his former employer and the date that he became unemployed here. Dad's going to fill out this next section. Go see the video about how to do that. Dad's going to fill out this section about his current income. And like we said, in this situation, Dad's not eligible for unemployment because he got fired. So Dad's probably not going to have much in this section. Now, after Dad sues his employer for wrongful termination and wins, he's going to have some additional income here that will cause him to need to fill out this section, but that's not what we're dealing with right now. Page 3 is interesting when a person is unemployed and not receiving any and doesn't have any income, because they usually still have all of these expenses. And what I want to know as the child support attorney and what the court wants to know is, how are you paying these expenses? Are these estimated expenses, actual expenses, proposed needs? In the situation where Dad's unemployed, I would do estimated expenses so that the court can see what Dad's expenses are right now. And then it's going to be important to explain, the amount of expenses paid by others. So it might be that 100% of these expenses are paid by others. Might be that Dad's mom, paternal grandma, takes pity on Dad and is paying his expenses because she knows that Dad really got a bad deal. Don't be afraid to explain what's happening. Now, as a child support attorney, I'm going to say, well, that's a gift, so that's income, so support should be based on that. And the court may or may not buy that argument. It really depends on the situation. Another thing I'm going to look for, and the court's going to look for, if Dad or you are unemployed and you have all these monthly expenses, are you incurring debt? And if you are, it's probably going to appear in this section if you're filling this out properly. So what I see with people who used to make a decent living and have pretty good credit is they start incurring credit card debt. And if you're incurring credit card debt to pay for your monthly expenses while you're unemployed, make a note of that so that we know. Sometimes mom, paternal grandma in this case, is paying 100% of the monthly expenses, but it's a loan because grandma's no fool. She knows Dad's going to sue his employer and get paid, and she knows Dad will be able to pay her back. Well, if that's the case and it's a loan, then you're going to note that loan down in this section. And it's really helpful if you also have documents that indicate that it's a loan, although that could create some other legal problems for you with a contract. That's another issue I'm not going to discuss. So there are some things to keep in mind if you're unemployed about your income and expense declaration. Page 3 is going to be just like any other income and expense declaration. This is an information sheet for service of process. So this is actually going to explain how to serve your documents on the department and on the other party. So you're going to have that person who's over the age of 18 and not a party to the case serve your responsive declaration or your response to governmental notice of motion, as well as your income and expense declaration on the other parent and the Department of Child Support Services. And then you are going to file with the court the original of your response and your income and expense declaration and 2 copies with the court. Now, interestingly, this proof of service doesn't cover an income and expense declaration. So you could go about, you're going to have a proof of service for that income and expense declaration. So you can do a couple things. You can attach the income and expense declaration as an exhibit to your response, or you can do a separate proof of service for the income and expense declaration. If you're going to do the separate proof of service, I would probably do the response to the motion and the income and expense declaration on the same proof of service. But let's say in this situation, we're going to attach the income and expense declaration as Exhibit A. So we're going to make a note of that. And then we're going to make sure that we write at the bottom of the income and expense declaration, Exhibit A. And when you have your response and your income and expense declaration served and filed, the income and expense declaration is actually going to be stapled to the response as an exhibit. So that in the court's eyes, they're only going to get one document, the response, with an attachment, the income and expense declaration. So there you go. That's how to quickly fill out a response to governmental notice of motion and an income and expense declaration. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you how I've seen others solve the problem, handle the situation, how I've handled the situation, and then of course it's up to you to decide if that's what's best for your case. Thank you for watching. Also, if there are any other videos you'd like to see, put that in the comments too, so that I can hopefully make some other videos that you guys are looking for.